Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. And we are back for another classic sugar cookie decorating tutorial. If you guys want to know the recipe for this particular dough that I'm using, go ahead and check out my video in the right-hand corner. I did want to point out that you'll notice that I'm really turning the dough and I add a lot of flour to my dough as well. So when you are rolling it out, if you decide to use my recipe, don't be afraid to use a little bit more flour than usual. So we're going to be making a fruit and veggie platter completely out of cookies. So first off, let's start with these lemons here, and I did use a lemon cutter. You could probably get away with it if you used like a circular cutter and just kind of shaped the ends a little bit if you didn't have a lemon cutter. Incidentally, I did have a lemon, so that works out perfectly. By the way, the recipe that I'm using today for my royal icing, it's just 1 cup of powdered sugar to 1 tablespoon of meringue powder, and then I add water as needed. Now, the consistency that I'm using today is a pipe and flood consistency. If you don't know what that is, you can check out this more detailed tutorial on that in the right-hand corner. Getting the proper consistency for your royal icing is probably the trickiest part because you want something that is smooth enough that it's just going to fall into itself, but also puffy enough so it still has that really great texture. I found that in the beginning, a lot of my cookies would have craters or the icing just seemed really thin. So being sure to whip your frosting really is the trick to getting this puffy, flooding consistency. Now you'll notice that I'm just going in and I'm base icing everything. This is generally my technique with most cookies. You'll notice here though that I am going to leave the broccolis kind of blank at the top. And I didn't have a broccoli cutter, so what I ended up using was kind of a rectangle cutter. And then I kind of smushed it together with this circular cutter. And the circular cutter with the scalloped edge, it obviously is a lot more circular, so I kind of mushed it down. This right here is actually a mustache cutter. You could easily create these little beans using maybe a half circle or a moon cutter if you have that. And what I'm doing is I'm actually putting down pipe and flood consistency, but I'm doing it in dot formations so it'll look like the peas underneath later. For these strawberries, to get this red color, what I always do with royal icing and dyeing things red is I always just dye it up to the point where it's still kind of light and it's not the perfect color. The reason is because red saturates over time a lot. Both red and black do this. All of your royal icing colors will saturate more over time once they're dry, but I find especially with red and black, this is the case. I know I say this a lot, but it's because it's true. Really, sugar cookies is all about layering your decor. That's all it really is. So what I did was I waited for those little kind of circles to dry and I dehydrated them, and then I placed the frosting over top. Now I wanted to show you here how I made a mistake with this first one. I put on too much frosting and then I really lost that look of the beans. So when I did it the second time around, you'll notice I'm being a lot more careful with putting that frosting around and then adding a little bit more on top. It is still necessary to add that portion underneath because if you don't, you won't have enough height to add on to that. And then once you add more royal icing right on top of those bumps, you do want to take some sort of cookie scribe just to make sure that it looks like all of that is actually underneath and not like you just have random bumps on the bean. Moving along with our strawberries, these are now completely dry. I did use my dehydrator trick. I have a video on that as well if you want to check it out. And I'm just taking the same pipe and flood consistency to create that stem. We're going to continue to use this pipe and flood consistency for quite a bit of the tutorial. Now for these little radish slices here, I added a little bit of purple and a little bit of red together to create that outline. And I didn't wait for these to fully dry, but I did want it to have a little bit of dryness to it. And then I went in and I added the white here. And you will notice, by the way, that I am using tipless piping bags. If you don't have access to tipless piping bags, you can use a number 2 tip, which is my preferred tip size. Now, if you're a beginning cookier, this is probably the most intimidating part, at least it was for me when I was first starting out, drawing these straight lines to create these celery sticks. Once you nail how to pipe a straight line, it is super easy, but I can see how it can be a little too intimidating sometimes. And that happens when we hold the piping bag too close to the cookie and then we kind of drag the piping bag through your line. And then you feel like you have to be ultra steady to get this nice and straight. But the best way to do this is to actually squeeze. You start at your starting point and then you lift, and then you stop at the end. All right, now this step is not a must, but if you are not going to be using an airbrush, this step will really help you. So you notice this is a very different green color than the stem. That's what we want. We want to create that contrast, and you will need that underneath so that when we add on the next part, you're going to have contrasting colors for that broccoli floret, and we end up using 3 different types of greens on there. While we're letting that underlayer dry, I'm going to move on to the cucumbers. For this, I'm just using a leaf green on the outside. By the way, I'm using Chef Master color today, some Americolor as well, food gels always. And then I'm going to add just a hint of green to the white to create this kind of cucumber color. Now that our broccoli is fairly dry, I'm going in with a much stiffer consistency now. So now we're switching over from that pipe and flood consistency, and I'm going in with a consistency that I created by adding more meringue powder and a little bit more icing sugar to the icing. And so it's nice and stiff so we can really see all of the details of the piping. For these seeds here, you could use a stiffer consistency. I believe I just stuck with the pipe and flood consistency because I already had it, and I did those in white so it would kind of look a little bit translucent. You could go a step further and actually do that with a completely different medium, but I just stuck with royal icing. This is the same consistency as the broccoli that we saw earlier, but what I did was I actually cut a V shape in the same piping bag to create this kind of leaf shape. For these carrots here, because they're so tiny, I decided to go with a thick consistency the whole way through. Had I done a pipe and flood, I think this would have taken a lot longer. Doing it this way did put a little bit of texture in that orange portion. However, I think you can get away with it a little bit because 1, they're really small cookies, and 2, carrots do have a little bit of texture, and the airbrushing that I do later on just kind of makes it all come together. So these cookies were being made for my friend's baby shower, and the whole theme was locally grown baby. So I tried to incorporate this on a few cookies. I was just asked to make fruit and vegetable cookies, but I decided to throw in this cute little banner here. And hands up if you are the same person as I am where you don't want to pull out your whole projector just to do a few pieces of lettering. I definitely could have gotten this even neater and even more close to the font that was being used for the party, but I really didn't feel like pulling out my projector just for 3 cookies. So I decided to freehand it. And again, I am using a thicker consistency. This is not pipe and flood consistency. This is the type that I normally use for details. It was about 11 o'clock when I finally finished those, so I decided to leave airbrushing and painting for the morning of the baby shower. So what I'm doing here is I'm really directing this airbrush color right in the center, so it's kind of underneath on the stem, and then just sporadically placing it on the broccoli, because as we know, broccoli has varying shades of green throughout. Sometimes it also has a little bit of yellow too, so you could add little hints of that too. I just decided to go with straight green, and I also added it to the apple and to the peas as well, really directing it around those bumps to really differentiate that and make it pop. And if you don't have access to an airbrush, you could easily achieve all of this with petal dust. I just like to use my airbrush because it's a lot faster, and just in case that royal icing isn't completely dry, you can still use the airbrush fairly easily. Whereas I find with petal dust, there's more chance of you just kind of puncturing the cookie by accident. So that's why I like to use it, but if you don't want to invest, I completely understand. Definitely something that you need to make sure that you're using on a frequent basis to make it worth it. I want to avoid getting any of the silver airbrush on the actual jar itself, so I'm really making sure to cover that up and then put it just on the lid. I'm also going in with a little bit of blue here because the jar picture that they showed me for the invitation had a little bit of a blue tinge to it. Moving along to the painting portion, I am using an edible paint, so you don't have to add any vodka or anything else to it to make it work. It just works beautifully, and I gotta say that the color really does shine through. And I am painstakingly doing this. I'm sure there are stencils that exist out there where you're just able to airbrush it on, but I unfortunately don't have that. So instead, I'm using a really thin brush, and I'm just using a dotting technique for this. I found when I tried to actually paint the shape of the seed, it just was not working. I love the way all of these cookies turned out. Not every time when I create a project do I love it, but I truly, truly love these. They're so cute. Let's get into the pricing of these cookies. Prices have gone up exponentially in pretty much every facet of my life. So you'll notice that there is a price jump from my previous videos till now because I really have to account for that fluctuation in price. The only ones that would not be included would be the carrots. They're too small, so I wouldn't be able to make much of a profit off of them, so I probably wouldn't sell those ones. Now let's get into the subscriber submission of the video. I love this cake. It is so gorgeous. I love all of the treats on it, and I really love how they utilize my eucalyptus leaves tutorial. So shout out to them, go drop them a like, and drop them a comment. And if you want to be the next featured subscriber submission of the video, then please follow me at SD Bake Shop on Instagram, where you can either tag me in a photo or send me a photo. Any and all dessert levels are welcome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!